Dear friends, I am glad to welcome everyone to the Feigen Life channel today, Tuesday, December 30th. On the very eve of the new year. Time 20 hours 2 minutes in Kiev. 21 hours and 2 minutes in Moscow. We are holding another stream on our channel. And today, Vitaly Portnikov is visiting us, as in general, every week. Vitaly Derek, I am glad to welcome you. Greetings. When we called this Anchorage, we called the smell. They wanted to reduce the anchorage, so to speak, to go down. We didn't know yet that they would be like this, the smell would be so smoky. The Valdez sewer smells. Hey. Because in a certain sense, it would be necessary to make a direct reference. And in my opinion, it turned out very accurately. Moreover, there is no miss. There is no mistake in our previous esters. Anyway, we discussed how it all will end. Well, they chose this method of graduation. So what? I must say that you have been much more, I would say, consistent than me, because you had no doubt that nothing at all would end in nothing. Yes, I have, but I have said many times, why? Because I am much inferior, perhaps, to you and a number of other experts. Maybe in understanding exactly the Ukrainian situation, or the West in the sense of Ukrainian history, but I know very well that it is not just the Kremlin, as such, as a substance, but people. These are all their insides, you understand, which I observed in the Duma. Well, you personally are somewhere, but I saw it as a kind of substance in general. And I understand their service, hardware logic, these bureaucratic little things, that's how it is, what kind of fake to invent. I can just imagine this meeting. Well, what do we have? Well, let's say that they wanted to kill Putin at the residence. Well, it's weak. I even think it's not. It was. Putin told Ushakov, we warned you that you would make up some stupid plan, and then they would add some points to it, and say that it was on our trump, and this city lunatic would demand that we approve this plan. Here we have come to this. You were afraid of it yourself. And what to do now, Yura? Here he will call again. You know that Putin refused Trump a telephone conversation. Well, sort of. Yes. In the second phone conversation. After all, Trump clearly agreed with him that they would talk after the meeting with Zelensky. Yes. And probably, Putin watched this press conference of Trump and Zelensky. Saw that both are in a good mood. I realized that Trump would sell something that he didn't want to know. After all, Ushakov did not accidentally say that the agreements reached in Mar-a-Lago by Trump and Zelensky do not contribute. They don't cooperate, yes. Okay, but how can I say this so as not to offend Trump? It's understandable, this is a cavalry unit. Donald? They shelled my residence. Yes, they wanted to kill the unfortunate. They poured raw gunpowder into it. Raven. That's it. We call this cry a song. Well, then, that's the question. Did they initially, according to my version, intend to do this, or did it happen along the way? Why do I think it is initially? Because I will explain, because there was no Trump plan for Moscow. He wasn't there, but what kind? He refers to his speech in 2024 at the Foreign Ministry, at the Collegium, where he said, I told you everything. For regions, demilitarization, denazification, and everything according to the list, which completely does not correspond to 28 points. On the other hand, we see that these 28 points were written by Dmitriev, passed on by Vitkov, who apparently writes with errors in general, and so on. In other words, this is Moscow's plan, which was handed over to Trump. Yes, Ushakov apparently spoke, but they definitely won't go to him. It works, but however, this plan American. They can always say, wait, you discussed the American plan with 28 points. Then there was a Ukrainian-European plan with 20 points. And our plan, Putin says, it was then, before the peace summit in Switzerland, according to the formula of peace. On your initiative, I told you everything. At the board of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I said everything. So, where here along the way did they decide this? Or was it originally? I think it was simple enough. They sent this little thing to wits and skusters with one sole purpose, so that Trump would not impose sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. Yes, absolutely. They unveiled this plan just a day or two before the implementation of these sanctions. At that time, many people said, oh, this corruption scandal affected. Oh, the Americans showed it on purpose. To put pressure on Zelensky. It had nothing to do with one another at all. From the word at all. It was due to the fact that Dmitriev realized that Trump was leading sanctions anyway. This plan was being developed all the time by Withaf and Kushner. And he decided to make it public so that the Americans had nowhere to go. And Trump still led sanctions. Then they had the following task, no less important, by the way. And then they have succeeded in a certain sense. They continued these conversations, negotiations in order to. The Europeans did not confiscate their assets. And they managed to convince Withoff and Kushner, and they managed to convince Trump, that asset confiscation would slow down the peace process and disrupt this ingenious, senseless process. After that, Trump met with George Maloney and, in fact, conveyed to the Europeans through her that if they confiscated Russian assets, the plan would fail. Then they will be to blame. And the Europeans who have virtually ensured the possibility of confiscation by extending asset for an indefinite time, and thus got the opportunity to resolve the issue of qualified majority, abstained from this decision. Because the fact that they will be extremely understood, and not only cute, they are also others, but also from the main. From the grandees of the European Union, Ronald Macron, who after that said, "Then I will actually talk to Putin myself. If so, will Trump for us to talk with Putin, and there is something to tell us that Putin wants. We will learn what Putin wants from Putin himself." This is a reaction to this process. But they miscalculated what? They believed that if the Europeans did not confiscate assets, and the decision to allocate other money was necessary by unanimous vote, then Ukraine would not be given money in this way. Because Orban, or Fitz, or anyone else will block this decision. And then they miscalculated. Orban, as always, you know Orban. Well, yes, of course. Here, as usual, they underestimated Orban, who said everything correctly, who said that Hungary would not give money, but did not veto it. That's the kind of friendship. Therefore, they miscalculated here as well. But they could no longer withdraw from the negotiations. And they could no longer agree that these negotiations should lead to any concrete result. Therefore, they began to look for a homemade billet. Like, let's come up with a bombardment of the residents to at least slow down the process. They say we'll change our negotiating position, but did not say how. How's that? And what was your negotiating position? What do you want to change? No, I see. Now, as we understand it, the reference will be 2 large territorial concessions, reduction of security guarantees, and so on. But there was still a moment when there was hesitation, because at some point, until yesterday afternoon, well, it's closer to 16 o'clock, Lavrov's statement was made. There has not yet been this information about the drone raid on the residence on Valdai. After all, Ushakov himself has already begun to lay out there and say that we have not yet seen the plan. Which is agreed in 20 points, it was handed over to us, we are watching it, but this violates the spirit of Anchorage. Some of its position, attempts to adjust it. That's how it was said. That is, it was already possible to walk linearly. Well, listen, there's some kind of referendum, something quick instead of signing acceptance of the item 4 territorial concessions. And a number of others, and you and so we, this is not acceptable. But for some reason, they decided to rush. That is, they decided something. To say, to pull the pin, here in a rough form, because well, it's paradoxical at all. You see the raid, so to speak, and why plaque in general should affect your position. There is a war going on, you could just as well say that you fired at the headquarters, where theoretically Putin could come to visit somewhere in a year, or something else. Well, that is, the conditions of war do not imply any taboos, especially unspoken ones, since we do not shoot President Valdai. It's everywhere, as if all objects are related. Why exactly did they choose such a rather primitive way of excusing themselves? Well, maybe they calculated that Trump would react to this. But did he react or not? This is a full-fledged reaction. Well, I reacted somehow, so if it's outrageous, I'm very angry, I've already succeeded. You see, Trump may already need it too. He can also understand that he hasn't achieved a damn thing. He also needs to somehow get out of the situation, explaining why nothing is working out. Why do we need more time? And so the Ukrainians thwarted my wonderful intentions, fired at Putin. He will play in favor of Moscow in this situation. But while he is playing in favor of Moscow, he was asked by journalists at a press conference with Netanyahu. And why are you sure that this happened? He says it might not have happened, but it probably might not have happened. But Putin told me what happened, you know, this is such a reality. Firstly, secondly, there is another point. I'll tell you why they decided to react so quickly. This is also understandable. because they noticed that Trump was beginning to trap them into a truce with Zelensky. That is, on the one hand, the Americans say that they do not need a truce, but on the other hand, they begin to say, maybe there should be a referendum. Yes, a truce is needed for a referendum, of course. A truce is needed for a referendum. Let's have a truce for 30 days or 60. And there will be a referendum, and then we will extend the truce. And we will continue to negotiate. It was a trap. And they are an elegant way as any gopnik out of traps cannot. So they decided that they would blow up the space around. Well, it's fine. We have read this in all, so to speak, textbooks of Russian military science. It is necessary to throw this body on the pillbox. Okay, good. By the way, almost 8,000 of us are already watching. About 2,000 have put their likes. I remind you that you should still distribute links to this broadcast. One of the last airs until the next 2026. Please do it. Be sure to like it if you like it. Discussion? Don't forget to subscribe to the Feigen Life channel as well. That's easy to do. And on the channel, of course, Vitaly Portnikov in the description of this video. Named Vitaly Portnikov is a link to the channel. Vitaly Pork, where this broadcast is also going on, you can subscribe, watch the broadcast there, and so on. And so on, and so on. I do notice that you are affected by life outside of Russia. You lexically began to use Western expressions. You must, 5 must, right. And actually, in Russia, they would be in Russia, they said you could. Well, it's such an Anglicism. Well, only yes, of course. Well, it affects. I don't know, I'm trying to diversify. Although I pay tribute to the style, you can't blame me here. But the question is, what then next? Right now, to close this track in general, to say, well, that's it, plans are being swept aside. We are starting to work on a new plan. Or continue to work on these plans, which are essentially rejected. After all, this is not an intermediate impasse, but in general a whole stage impasse, let's say. Well, everything was undermined. Now we will start, Moscow will say, firm the plan proposed by Moscow in 2024 at the board of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They repeated it in different ways, by the way, even before everything, before the meeting in Florida, and so on. What stage can be implemented now? I think they will negotiate, but try to reduce their effectiveness. They are going to form some working groups after the new year. But this is going nowhere. Working groups are about nothing. Why lower it down from above? Nothing will be solved there at all. They'll say, well, we've been sitting here, what are you going to decide up there? Everything is decided at the top. Nothing is ever solved at the bottom, when this process has already begun from above. That's what I mean. Of course. But if Putin and Trump have agreed on working groups, it means that Trump agrees to such a reduction. And there is another problem in the working groups. You see, Trump wants officials to join his working group. Ruby, Hackett, General Cole, the chief of the Joint Staff. The chiefs of staff. I have to tell you that this means that he wants concrete agreements. Not just to chat with Withoff Kushner about Antarctica, but something that could be formalized into a document. Because otherwise he wouldn't need Rubio and Hex there. And Putin does not want to issue a document. That's the problem. Well, it means that he will lower the level of the delegation. It will be Ushakov, conditionally. That's where Ushakov will be. It could be Lavrov, since Ruby will be there. Dmitriev? Yes. Maybe even they will sit and rub about something, if it takes place at all. Or the first meeting will take place, the first one. Ushakov's meeting with Lavrov will say, here we have a wonderful speech by Vladimir Vladimirovich, at the board of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2024. Read it, and Ruby will tell Trump, you know, there's nothing to talk about with them. Well, yes, they stay on you again. Please call Putin and explain. Because it is necessary to solve it in some other way. Well, and everything will go in a circle. Do you notice that this is a spiral-like process? Well, spiracular, of course. Only down. He's not going up, he's going down. It's down to a point in nowhere. Because, well, okay, but how is it in general? The perception of the establishment and public opinion in America in the context of the Epstein files and future elections. And in general, the attitude towards Trump in general. I remember your position that, in general, external issues cannot influence the position of voters. But they can't significantly influence, let's say. They cannot significantly influence. But after all, on weakness, an expression of Trump's weakness, it manifests itself in many issues. That he threatens Iran, that he threatened Venezuela, then he is still doing something. And nothing works out. Here is something that can definitely be attributed to his will. Like, for example, here's a blow to Ford, it really was a decision. Even though we know how it was taken, even though it was covered up so, by Israel's 12-day operation, but still. We don't see anything like this, so that he pulled the pin somewhere. Killed Madura, yes there, or something else in this style. Or he took it, gave tomahawks to Ukraine. This is also a solution in this style. In other words, it turns out that he will not be like that anymore. But we don't know what will happen after he is convinced that he perceives him as a weakling. He can get angry, as they say. It is not known only to whom. You see, it's easier for him to be angry at Ukraine than at Russia. Of course, for glory, of course. Then Ukraine will respond. It turns out that he will tell how important his contribution is. Well, in the same way, he tried to behave very strangely with Israel there yesterday, during Netanyahu's visit. You see, when he just almost demands that the president of Israel pardon Netanyahu, as if Israel is the American states. Not a sovereign state, what does it look like? The fact that here I can put pressure on you, and I will put pressure on you. So I want you to pardon Netanyahu. It doesn't matter what the courts decide, what society decides. Netanyahu is your great hero, he should be pardoned. That's what I want. It is clear that pressure can also be applied here, because Israel is critically dependent today much more. To a greater extent than before, even from the position of the United States. Because you see that the Israeli government has no real allies in Europe now, nor in the West as a whole. And the United States is such an obvious ally. But at the same time, again, the office of the President of Israel is somehow very careful. They responded to these demands of Trump, saying that he did not contact the President of Israel at all, did not talk. That is, he changed his mind again. When he said that he had contacts about it at all. Well, so it's all going to affect. And does this affect Trump himself? The fact that he's beating, he can't achieve any specific result. Now on the Ukrainian issue, as well as on some others, he is worried about the outcome of the elections. And they are elections, it's not just Democrats taking over Republicans. These are all consequences for Trump specifically. Not abstractly, but specifically for him, with all the charms, it means responsibility for insider trading after April 2nd. For Trump organizing $4 billion, for all sorts of dubious financial machinations of various kinds. And up to a possible initiation. Here's how it. Are you sure that there are consequences if Democrats take the Senate? It will not just end the debate in the House of Representatives. 1/3 of the Senate is re-elected there, too, in addition to the House of Representatives. But it's not so obvious what they can get. Not so obvious. Yes, I agree. But the process itself, we have already. You know, even if the Senate will remain under the Republicans, well, you know, the Senate is headed by the Vice President as the head. So there may be one voice, in fact, outweigh. But in the House of Representatives, completely different processes will begin. The Speaker is already there. But they will start, I think, in any case. Because, given the way this person treats the economy, it seems to me that he should completely destroy the American economy. Over the next year. I don't even mean its macro indicator, I mean the life of ordinary people. After all, he practically does not consider this. It seems as if he believes that his constituency is a group of digital billionaires. Well, yes, Wall Street. Yes. And the people who voted for him are, first of all, ordinary people. This hero of the common people, who believed, as often happens, with a simple, uneducated, irresponsible people, that electing Trump will bring them some real economic benefits. This is not happening. Yes, it is clear that it will always remain religious. Populist politicians always have a religious sect. But we see that among undecided voters, his popularity is melting, even among many Republicans. It's not as popular as it was at the time of the election. I believe that all this will only go downhill. Because I don't see him having the resources to move up, because he just doesn't understand what he's doing. That's what will amaze. And again, even Trump of the second term, Trump of the first term, did not behave like that. But on the other hand, you can see that at the same time, he lives in some kind of bubble of himself. Almost medically. Because here he really told, again, at the same press conference with Netanyahu, that Putin praised him. That he ended the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in one day, which Putin could not. This is bullying. Absolutely mocking. Putin is just mocking him, Because he has nothing special to do with the end of this conflict at all. And by the way, if we talk about who really graduated from it, it's Putin, who practically did not come to the aid of Armenia. During the Second Karabakh War. I totally agree. Well, he didn't come in the first one, so. No, the first one was in the 90s, I mean the second one. And I mean it was in 2020. And I mean in 2020, I mean the Second Karabakh War. I mean her. The second one, yes, but the third one was already there, yes. And the third one, which ended with the complete restoration of control on the territory of Karabakh, was now. I don't think it's the third one, I think it's a continuation of the second one. There was no war there as such. Well, periodization is such a question. But we just understand perfectly well that during the First Karabakh War, Russia mainly helped Armenia. Naturally, because she was dissatisfied with Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was clearly not ready to hand over control of oil resources. The Russians hated Abulfaz Rasaib. More than Levin tolerates the Russian. I don't think they loved Terpetrosian. But Terpetrosian simply did not have oil and gas. Do you understand? It was possible to dislike him, but not as fiercely as Al-Sibia, who, in their opinion, simply blocked their way to the resources of this country. Well, which they never received, these resources, because Gaidar Alievich is not the person who will give resources to anyone at all. But they did not count on Aliyev as the head of Azerbaijan. They were counting on completely different people. Well, in general, this is all a historical digression, but I'm just saying that if Russia had behaved differently during the Second Karabakh War, I'm not saying that Azerbaijan would not have been able to establish control over most of the territory, which was controlled before by Armenian forces. I'm just saying that there would be no possibility of reconciliation because Russia could, to demonstrate that it is ready to further defend Armenia, one way or another, that it is an ally of Armenia. And thus Yerevan simply would not even have the opportunity to start negotiating with Baku. All this happened exactly when Moscow left the Armenians to their fate. They had to look for other points of support. In Paris, Washington, yes. Therefore, when Putin tells Trump all this, it is, of course, just a mockery. But why am I talking about it in such detail? Because it seems to me that Trump's misunderstanding of what is happening around him is also one of Putin's important trump cards. So, 12,500 viewers are watching us right now. And the request to them is still to distribute links. We are 23 minutes without a little on the air. And let me also remind you that we are helping Russian viewers this year and next year to have access to social networks that are blocked in the Russian Federation. Messengers that are also blocked, and the only universal way here is to connect to Figen VPN, subscribe to it. A 1-year one costs only €70. For today's money, nothing at all. So from Russia, you can pay with Russian cards without access to Visa MasterCard payment system via Telegram bot, Figen VPN bot. There is a link in our chat of this broadcast. In the description, there is a link to the Figen Livnet website. You can, accordingly, there is also a link to Telegram bot. Well, through the site, you can pay with foreign cards that have such access. I would recommend yearly subscription, because you pay only once. But if you don't really need it, if you live abroad, send your relatives, parents. There's someone else a key to subscribe to this VPN, they will use it, and will continue to have access to social networks and messengers to communicate with you and so on. So don't forget, this is important, because the situation is already getting worse by leaps and bounds. In other words, the blockages continue in Russia, and in general, the exercises continue. How to cut off Russians from the city in general. Global network, so that today it is the only tool. Of course, there are a lot of VPNs, but we recommend our own, we are responsible for our own. And what happens to others there, we will not undertake to judge. So, well, we continue. Then let's go back to Russia. We are interested in Vitaly of Russia. In what other sense? Okay, can we say that Putin is, in principle, the two tactics that he holds can hold on to? The first is that I will not negotiate anything. I was convinced that I could really turn the situation around by military means, move quickly, and therefore achieve an intermediate result, in the form of the administrative borders of the Donetsk region and further tearing, creating a situation of pressure that is unbearable for Kiev. The second situation, yes, and I quickly reached the abyss there, jumping over in one jump. The second situation is with a general misunderstanding. That is, the economy is really slow but folds into a recession. That is, there are many signs of this. There are generally Rostat figures. You can't even invent it here. Putin, by and large, is not in a hurry, despite all the problems that they probably tell him about, they come to him. They report to him. No, we will fight even in Wenatchee, and, therefore, with three-line power. I don't care. There won't be. You will eat the bark, you will be there anything, but you will go into battle. That is, this is the second option, so to speak, to starve, then it's just Russian. The exhaustion is ready, but the rest are not. Not so many Ukrainians, but Europe is there. It is not ready to help Ukraine indefinitely. There will be some problems. Well, there are other explanations. His unwillingness to agree, to make at least some minimal compromises. But still, which version is most likely in the current circumstances? Right now? Well, that's a good question, because you can choose some third option, as usual. Yes, you can choose any option, maybe offer your own option. We need to explain why he behaves like this. I think he acts that way because he understands that the economy is not in the best condition, but wants to continue fighting. And he may think that by prolonging some ephemeral peace process, he can at least protect himself from some part of the sanctions. Well, yes, they have introduced sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, but maybe they are not leading new ones in the near future, so as not to scare off its readiness for peace. Well, yes, money was given to Ukraine, but Russian assets were not confiscated. So it can work. I think, by the way, the story of the Russian assets could have encouraged them that it could work, that they could use Trump as a tool. The main thing is not to withdraw from the peace process. Right now, in theory, according to their logic, they should have been after Valdai. Kind of like that's it, we're getting out of this process. How can you have peace talks with terrorists and murderers who are shooting at Putin himself? There will be no Putin, there will be no Russia, we remember. Yes, of course. So it can be said simply in the heart of Russia. A shot. But they say, we will have a friendly dialogue with Trump. We really want a dialogue with Trump, we want to continue negotiations. It's just that our negotiating position will change. It's ridiculous. But this suggests that they still want to use negotiations as. This is the moderator of the sanctions pressure. That is, they just want to slow down the process, like WhatsApp or YouTube. Just slow down the process. It's wonderful that they're doing this at all. They all slow down. It's the kind of power that slows everything down. Historical processes, messengers, social networks are now slowing down negotiations. That is a sharp exit, they suggest. Abruptly, there is no way out, because why? Because it can be fraught with the fact that someone will be offended, will give tomahawks. Well, I'm conditionally speaking. Well, conditional tomahawks. Yes, or we won't stop some sanctions, yes. Yes, or sanctions. A trade embargo, for example. In other words, it turns out that the game will continue. Continuation of your two options. Yes. But the game will continue, so they will still tighten the conditions, they will still say no, let the groups work, but you are courting us. We don't know how long it will take for us to go back to some kind of mitigation, to what, to where. Well, here you are courting us. Or you will say that no sudden movements are being made. You know, otherwise you are leading new sanctions against us. We will be offended. We will be offended, yes. And again, we will tighten the position. Take our money, it's a declaration of war. You can't. In other words, behave calmly, and maybe then we will think on the day of the referendum in Ukraine, not to fire at them. Here is a simple formula. Directly with the board of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, who's to blame that Trump takes it all seriously? It's not Putin's problem, you know. It's a problem that he got such a client. Digestible. Well, you know, if Trump is absolutely serious about saying Zelensky's words at a press conference, that Putin really wants Ukraine to succeed. Yes, and wants to restore it. Yes. It still speaks of some kind of inadequate reaction, right? Well, of course. Moreover, this is not a politically inadequate reaction. It speaks of some kind of complex state of the psyche. That he's just repeating what he's being told. By the way, I don't believe Putin told him that. He could have told him in some form. Russian cities, if this Ukraine were a normal country where everything Russian would be respected, it's, you know, everything Russian. Russian cities, then I would really like such a country to succeed, and this is a bandit terrorist country. He could say something firm which Trump made a convenient conclusion for himself. Or decided to troll Zelensky. On the other hand, we sometimes say that he was not himself. And he's just trolling people, as we see. Here he is constantly at meetings with Netanyahu telling what a cool guy Erdogan is. Well, it's trolling, yes. This is bullying. He knows perfectly well that Netanyahu is furious at this moment. He knows perfectly well how Erdogan treats Israel, how he treats Netanyahu. Erdogan compared Netanyahu to Hitler. What more do you want? Netanyahu is one of the sponsors of terrorism in the Palestinian territories, one of the main allies of Hamas. Erdogan? Yes, Erdogan. And he knows that when he pronounces all in the presence of Netanyahu, Netanyahu frantic. Because Netanyahu has a slightly different character than Zelensky. He's just freaking out. Zelensky can somehow contain it inside himself at some point. Maybe he's learned. Natalyaka is also restrained, but I think he has more inner croaking than Zelensky. After all, he is a professional politician who has been sitting in this all his life. He knows that you can't do that. And he can't answer anything. Here he sees that there is a man mocking him, mocking Israel. And he even says, "Lord, we are so delighted, God has sent you to us, we will give you the Israel prize." It's just that Israel is blessed by God in your person, after all that a person says about Bardagan. That is, at this moment, Netanyahu just wants, probably as a combat officer, to get a pistol and empty the clip. But he is forced to. Slavoslavets. Well, Trump is thrilled. He understands that he doesn't really want to rub, that he wants to beat just at this moment for Erdogan. By the way, note that he does not say anything in the presence of Erdogan, Netanyahu. Well, of course, yes. Yes. Because he knows exactly where to mock and where not to. In other words, he is more scrupulous with authoritarian leaders. Of course, he knows that an authoritarian leader can answer him in a way that he will not like. That Erdogan will not say at the mention of Netanyahu, "I am delighted, you are Turkey's best friend." Well, that is, he can say it all, but to say that Netanyahu killed Palestinian children. And this should not go unpunished, but all this can be said in the presence of Trump. This is Erdogan. Therefore, Trump will not give him such a reason. By the way, many people said that it was good. A sign. And this, by the way, could also have puzzled Putin, that he did not arrange a preliminary show for Zelensky. Yes, with journalists, as it was the previous 2 times. Yes, and how it happens to many. But the lack of pre-shows is a demonstration that he is going about something. To talk seriously. Because he's had with Putin and 11 Jinping, nothing like satisfied. No, well, Putin would never go for it. Putin would not have met if there was such a podpal. He would get up and leave. Of course. Well, he didn't go to Anchorage when the journalist was launched. Shouted something to them. He was silent. He just didn't say anything. And he didn't let it last, so to speak. That is where he, hello, oh, that's all we saw. He didn't enter into any debate. With no one. No, I think the protocol stipulated there that we did not talk to each other in the presence of each other. In the presence of journalists. Of course, it was protocol. Well, there's a minute-long protocol survey, and that's it. Let me remind you, they didn't say anything even at the press conference. They just came out with messages, and that's it. And they dispersed. And that's it. Well, they had nothing to say. Well, there was nothing to say. You see this, so to speak, the spirit of the college has already appeared after the fact. Yes, in interpretations. In interpretations. Yes, they came up with some kind of Anchorage spirit later, but there was nothing in Anchorage itself. Absolutely nothing. This, by the way, is important to track at what point, because so many things happen that you start to forget something. At what point did he abandon the idea that a ceasefire was needed first, and then a peace treaty? It didn't happen in Anchorage. Well, it's clear, he started Trump articulating it after Anchorage, although I think it's a little long ago. Prior to that, for some time it was already clear that since Putin agrees to a 30-day ceasefire, and, apparently, after some visits of turns in Moscow, it became clear that this should be abandoned because it is useless. It has no prospects. But it seems to me that he discussed this issue with the Europeans, and after a telephone conversation with Putin, which then still happened. What did he say to the Europeans? That a peace treaty is needed. Yes, a big peace treaty without recognition. That is, he was, let's say, going down into this hell consistently. At first, he said that an unconditional ceasefire was needed. Then he said that no, I have never advocated an unconditional ceasefire, there may be conditions for a ceasefire. And then he started saying that there was no need for a ceasefire at all, that a peace treaty was needed. Well, that is, he moves in Putin's paradigm all the time. And I don't think it's because Putin has such an influence on him, but because he believes that, most likely, if he behaves like this, Putin will agree to some kind of cessation of the war. I think he's making a pass to him. Because he convinced himself that Putin wants an end to the war, he just needs comfortable conditions, which does not correspond to reality. Well, of course. No, well, everyone always says how long it will last, how much Trump has a reserve. To portray, to replay, to win back, then, it means, to return to some starting version, it means, with a statement already against Moscow in the form of a paper tiger. And then to act out it all, as if it had never happened. And with the transition to you will still lose territory, so give in. Putin will seize everything anyway. That is, how does this planeta of his run from one to another position back? This is Putin's influence after all, as we understand it. Well, in many ways Putin's influence, in many ways an attempt to really solve this problem through Putin's concessions and attempts to increase the level of these concessions, and in many ways, there may simply be a problem of his chaotic behavior. He generally makes chaotic decisions all the time. This is not only connected with Russia and Ukraine. Remember the story of tariffs, remember the story of China. Well, absolutely. How many times have we talked about all this wandering around Venezuela? That's it. Yes, they also say you don't understand anything. Here he will show everything here. My chat was full of Trumpists who wrote that Feigen does not understand anything, says that he does not understand anything there. And there are also Trumpists, yes, there are Russian-speaking ones. Well, it's not enough, but they're still trying somehow. They are still trying somehow somewhere, but already very little. There are some at all. Have you seen the beautiful open letter of Konstantin Tanchabarinov? Of course. Comrade Stalin, a monstrous mistake has occurred. But after that he tried to soften it somehow. Konstantin Natanovich, then, still considers himself a Trumpist. However, I don't understand what this is based on. But, as they say, everyone is free, so to speak, to explain reality as he pleases. Polina Semyonovna Zemchuzina, wife of Vyacheslav Mikhailovich Molotov, she considered herself to have become low after several years in the camp. Well, she sat there decently, she didn't sit there very much. So, as is known, only graves will be fixed from these people. I just wouldn't want Trump to bring down the consensus to the grave ahead of schedule. No, I didn't want to. We wish Konstantin Natanovich to live for a very long time. But nevertheless, all the same, that is, it turns out, Trump's eccentricity, his hesitation, everything. It has the nature of external influence, or to a greater extent, it is himself. Like this. I think he's so medical himself now, as they say, because he's just rushing around. But there is also an external influence, because he sincerely sympathizes with people whom he considers a match. In this sense, it does say, here it is so to say, the condition of the students forever, overripe, which sees the hussars. And all that is, God. Says Madam, you have all graduated from this institution. You have been the mother of the wife of I. Grandma, what are you worried about? Well, I can't hold on when I see these pallets. I'm worried. And so he, when he sees a dictator, when he sees a murderer, when he sees a man who bent his country into a rum's horn, he just trembles. You will remember how he spoke after the meeting with Jinping. God, what a wonderful Chinese delegation. They were all silent. No one said a word, no one opened his mouth. That's how I would like it. Well, in other words, it is a mixture, I would say so, of the current physical state, associated, perhaps, with some irreversible age-related changes, and, unfortunately, a political sympathizer of authoritarianism. Besides, I generally think I have said many times, that it's not even that I suspect Trump of any medical problems there. Problems. I'm not a doctor. But I generally think that being in such a position as the President of the United States, in any position of the President, but especially of the United States, is a terrible stress. Yes, of course. This is a terrible test for any organism. Absolutely, of course. Because, it seems to me, it seems that people who have never led anything, they do not really understand what it is to lead something. I completely agree with you. Therefore, you can never explain it to them. If you yourself were engaged in some kind of activity like this, where you were responsible for people, there are hundreds, thousands, it doesn't matter. And you are always, relatively speaking, just by yourself, some kind of private entrepreneur, an employee. You won't even understand what we are talking about. It's like living in different worlds. It's like sex, if you've never had, you words can't explain what's going on. At this moment, some other chemical compounds are produced with the body, which are not produced if you do not do this. It's the same with power. And when you make a decision as the President of the United States, and every day you think about all this, cook in all this. Choose some options, that somewhere to lie, somewhere not to lie, somewhere to avoid complexity, and somewhere to take risks. It destroys the body. In 80 years, it destroys the body is much stronger than at 60 or 50. By the way, we saw this under Joseph Biden. Yes. How did he come to be President of the United States? And how did he leave? And as he told his wife after that debate with Trump, I don't understand what's happening to me. And I understand what's going on with you. This is a terrible stress. Listen, when we 50-60 years, and we overcome any distance, transatlantic flights. We also know that we are in stress, but then we go out with someone, communicate, during holidays, can set their schedules. And imagine that you are the President of the United States, you have a transatlantic flight, then a press conference. Then some kind of meeting where you need to solve peace issues. Yes. You're going crazy. And your whole body is protesting, including your brain. Therefore, I generally believe, given Trump's current state, that all of this will progress geometrically. Progressions. I do not know at all what state it will be in at the end of 2026. Psychologically. He may be a strong man from the point of view of the body, but the head will collapse. And the worst thing is that the people who will be near him, and see that a catastrophe is just happening, they will be this catastrophe. Hide it. By the way, it has already been so it was with Biden. This was the case, by the way, in Ronald Reagan's second term. Yes, we remember, it's very good, of course. Everyone around me said, I remember it very well when he came to Moscow. Here, even close journalists from the White House pool said that he's in a state where he just very often confuses Schultz with Baker, as they say. But, nevertheless, he retains his posture in public, is able to pronounce a speech beautifully. He was able to complete the term with dignity. But only God knows what it cost him. Because it was an inhuman strain of everything. A person in this state should just sit at home and relax, and not work with the President of the United States of America. And now it's going to be the worst situation, believe me. And this person is capable of making some huge strategic mistake, because he simply will not understand what he is doing. Therefore, I expect the most tragic consequences for America from his presidency. If they don't, it will be just a miracle, it will be. I just wish there weren't any, but it has to be hoped for a miracle. It is from this point of view that I am not analyzing political views now. Do you understand? If the President of the United States would be J.D. Vance now, yes, he is a man of ultra-right views, in fact. Views that could be characterized in the 30s of the 20th century, quite specific. But this is an energetic young man who understands what is possible, what is impossible, where to stop. And here there is a problem of a completely different nature. And the problem we see every day, when it comes to the Russian-Ukrainian war, that he was just confused in the testimony. And Putin uses it, because I am sure that Putin has already received all the medical experts, all the certificates, all the dossiers. All this lies, how to influence him, how he reacts to such stimuli, how he reacts to such words. Putin just works with him according to the textbook. Well, the only thing that saves us is that they are crazy in the Kremlin. They are also asking some stargazers there, guessing on maps. And this can also lead to some mistakes, because it is very important for them that the star is in this position. They have it. It's very strange that they are like that, but not like that. But everything else they are doing quite well. And this is the forecast of what will happen next with them and with Trump. But in this whole situation, unpredictability and chaos are still the main thing. And, in fact, Putin is also quite a chaotic person. On the one hand, he is following a completely specific path, but he can take very specific side bounces on this road. Because it seemed that it was better this way, but it's better this way. He quickly reformats some of his decisions. In other words, he is less chaotic than Trump. And perhaps more professional. But this is only against the background of Trump. By itself, this is also a person, not himself. The best qualifications and not the most predictable actions. Well, Putin is aggravated by age to the same extent. He stays longer with this state of anxiety in office. In other words, there are some discussions about this, too. I believe that this is not a question of age, it is a question of the decomposition of the individual. In the conditions of many years of unlimited power, he can make mistakes in this state. Of course, very seriously. And, again, you need to understand that we saw that it is a corruption of an individual in terms of absolute power. It happens to people with absolutely outstanding political qualities. Here is a very striking example, let's say Nursultan Nazarbayev. But we remember Nazarbayev in the late 80s, late 90s. And what did he turn into by the age of 85? He just turned into a monster. We don't see anything close to what we knew about Nazarbayev at all. Well, here is a man who has been sitting all his life, forgot who he is by and large, on this, so to speak, commanding Kazakhstan. But, again, this is a party worker, this is a person who reached the first secretary of the Central Committee of the party, right? And here is a man who got from dirt to princes. Do you understand what's going on in his head at all? Well, this is an encouraging factor for us. This is an encouraging factor. That is, it can be considered. By the way, the big mistake was the beginning of the operation against Ukraine. He deliberately led it, but he did not count on the result that he received. He counted on arrogance and dogmatism. He really believes that there is no Ukrainian people. No, it's understandable, yes. And now, well, of course, it's clear. In other words, he is fraught with mistakes, even, for example, those that he has now convinced himself. That he does not need to negotiate, he does not need peace agreements, that he will achieve everything by military means. Can we assume that? Yes, of course, he is absolutely sure of it. This could be a very serious miscalculation. And, by the way, Trump is much more rational in this sense, when he says, "You've been banging on an open door for 4 years. Maybe you'll take something else and calm down for a while. And we will be fine, I will earn money, you will earn money. I'll get the Nobel Prize, you'll get a break. Then you will think further about what to do. Now you can give me the opportunity to live in peace these 3 years that I have left. Especially since you can't take anything anyway. And I'll make you rich." And this is a rational approach. A rational approach. Well, yes, and he doesn't go for it. And he doesn't go for it. In the belief that he will get more. Yes, that he would get everything. That he would get everything. And this also does not speak at all about his genius, so to speak, political. Not, of course, naturally. Well, actually, political genius now, as you can see, not particularly. It's not visible. Yes. Well, we've been almost 50 minutes. We have been on the air for 49 minutes. Of course, we will not cross a certain border, violate our regulations. Better leave something for the future, the next year, because it will allow the situation to unfold in the direction that allows it to comment in a known manner. And those 18,5, almost 18,600,000 who are watching us, please still place links to this broadcast in your accounts. In social media groups, be sure to like this broadcast, as 5,500 almost did it. And be sure to subscribe to the Feigen Life channel and put a bell so that you receive notifications about the next broadcasts. New airs are waiting for us for all these holidays. We're not going to stop. And of course, subscribe to Vitaly Portnikov's channel. In the description of this video by the name of Vitaly Portnikov, you will find a channel and you can subscribe. Watch the broadcasts, of course, there too. Well, Vitaly Ivanovich, thank you for this broadcast today. Of course, congratulations to everyone, Vitaly Ivanovich, on the upcoming holidays. Happy New Year, Mark Zakharovich, yes. Have a good year. How successful can it be? Thank you very much. And congratulations to all the viewers, just in case. See you soon. Bye, everyone.